Hello, everybody. I have a fun little project for the day and some really cool tips that are going to make all the difference in the world, just in general, for this kind of surging and things like that. So I can't wait to get started here. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Catherine from the Sewing Studio at Lady Lake in the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore. Welcome aboard to today's 5-Minute Friday. So I found this cool little project for fingerless gloves actually it's called Patterns for Pirates. They've got a really cool site. They have really, really wonderful instructions and a video on how to put these fingerless gloves together. Why fingerless gloves? Well, we are in Florida, so sometimes you don't need the full-on gloves. But for everywhere else in the country, the other thing to consider, especially as we get older, is the sun and the effects on our skin. So actually, several of my customers have come in lately with like sleeves that they've got so that as they're driving, their arms are protected. So this would be a really cool and very pretty way to handle that. Okay, so if you go again, Fingerless Gloves is the title of the blog that they did in the video, and it's from Patterns for Pirates. However, today I want to focus on some of the things that you can do to make this project a little bit easier, some tips for your serger. So I want to start by talking about when you go over multiple seams, for instance, on the side here where we're having our side and your thumb part, the top part of your hand and the bottom part of your hand and the side piece together. Right here, this is quite a bit of thickness. Right here at the bottom where we're trying to cover stitch over this seam. Again, it's quite a bit of thickness right here. So what is something we can do to like challenge that, battle that, combat that, and make life a little easier for ourselves? Well, actually, just like you would do on a quilt, you can nest your seams. So what does that mean? Okay, well, if we look right here on this piece here, I've got the center seam that I have on my project, and then down here at the bottom of the seam, what happens is right here where the fold is, that's where you're going to actually clip your seam right to the needle stitches so that when you fold up your piece here, you actually are going to put one side of your serged seam to the left and one side of your serge seam to the right so that way you've got it split on either side of the seam. Okay, so let me show you that in action. Here I've got my piece. I've got my serge seam on the side. So what can I do to help this right here? Well, right here at my 1/2-inch seam allowance, I'm going to clip right up to my last little serger thread there that's holding it together. You've got to have a really good sharp pair of scissors when you do this, by the way, especially with knits, because knits want to like run away from the scissors. So I have clipped my piece right there, right up to the seams. So now, as I open this up, what I'm going to do is I will have 1/2 of my seam on the right and 1/2 of my seam on the left. So that when I fold that to get ready to do my cover stitch there, the bulk is greatly reduced right here because I'm not going over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of fabric. I've split that bulk between 2 different sections. Okay, so now when we go to sew this or cover stitch this, by the way, when I did this project, I found it abundantly helpful to go back and forth between my serger and my cover stitch machine. Just so you know, it made things go a lot faster. Okay, so as I go to cover stitch this, I chose to line the edge of my fabric, my fold, with the edge of my presser foot, and I chose to do a wide cover stitch just because I find it a lot faster and easier to deal with rather than 2 skinny little needles close together. Okay, so as I approach this seam here, that's what you're going to be looking at because it's nested. Okay, so I'm going to slow down just so you can kind of hear it going over. See, it went over it with absolutely no problems. Now, the other trick I wanted to talk about was right as we get to the end. One of the things that you can do to pull your threads underneath when you're doing your cover stitch to end your seams is you'll leave your needles in the down position. You'll raise your presser foot and just release some of your thread. Put your presser foot back down, lift your needles back out, and now what you're doing is you're going to kind of pull that thread off and to the back. So I've got my thread still through the eye of my needle, but then I've got it pulled off to the side. Okay, so from there, I'm going to just take my scissors in there and trim it. And what happens now is you'll lift your presser foot and gently pull your piece out, and it's actually going to pull your threads down to the bottom side of your fabric. So now all you have to do is cut your cover stitch thread on the bottom. So now from the top, you can see none of your threads are visible because you've managed to pull everything down underneath. So that was very strong serger tip number 2. I think that that just helps make the project go so much easier to reduce the bulk in the side seam and to make sure you pull your threads down underneath at the end. And one more thing that I wanted to show you all is that oftentimes people ask, how do I end my serger seams? Do I cut right close, or do I give a tail, or what do I do? Well, traditionally, and again, since I have a theater background, traditionally you want to make a garment last. And the best way to do that is to leave a nice tail on your piece. And so here I've got my tail, but I've got it run through a large-eyed needle. And by doing that, I can run my needle through my seam, the end of my seam there. And by doing that, I'm going to pull my tails into my piece so that now I've got a contained N on the end of my seam right there, okay? So now you can clip that, trim it, and everything's good. And the outside edge of your seam is going to be nice and finished. And that's it for today. Those 3 tips. If you've got your large-eyed needle, you're going to run your tail through about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of your seam. The other thing you want to do is to clip where you're going to fold up your fabric for doing your cover stitch. And then finally, when you get to the end, leave your needle sunk in, lift your foot, pull down some thread, put your foot back down, lift up your needles, pull the thread through, and now pull everything underneath. And that's it for the day. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. You'll find more videos and tutorials on our YouTube channel. So if you visit the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore on YouTube, it's a purple dot, or you can always visit us on our Facebook pages. We've got at least 2.5 years, if not 8, 9, 10, 11 years worth of videos available on our Facebook pages, the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore and the Sewing Studio at Lady Lake. Like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.